The young mechanic wiped his hands on a grease-stained shop towel, walked toward me, and asked a question that made no sense. "Mr. Price, when did you buy the blue work truck in Bay 3? "I didn't." He frowned. "It's got your service card inside the glove compartment." I laughed. "It can't." Then he handed me the card. Across the top were my full name, my National Guard veteran identification number, and a signature close enough to mine that I would have believed it from across the room. There was only one problem. I'd never seen the truck before in my life. If you've ever discovered your own name somewhere, it never should have been. Stay with me. Tyler Brooks had been bringing me impossible mechanical problems ever since he was a teenager, sweeping floors at his father's repair shop. Now he owned the place. I'd taught him something every National Guard motor pool supervisor eventually learns. Vehicles tell the truth if you stop arguing with the paperwork long enough to read it. He laid the service card on his workbench. "I figured maybe you forgot owning it." "I don't forget trucks." He smiled politely. "I thought you'd say that." The blue pickup waiting in Bay 3 looked ordinary. Construction rack, toolboxes, mud on the wheel wells, nothing memorable. Until I noticed the fleet maintenance sticker. It matched the inspection labels I had personally designed years earlier while supervising National Guard vehicle records. Only one digit had been changed. Interesting. Not proof. Just one small detail that refused to fit. Tyler opened the driver's door. "I haven't touched anything else." Inside the center console sat fuel receipts, county inspection reminders, oil change records. Everything pointed toward a truck that had been maintained carefully for several years. Everything except the owner. Because according to the service card, that owner was me. "I've never registered this truck." "I know. I checked before calling you." He handed me another document. Routine maintenance history. Every repair order carried the same customer identification number. Mine. For several long seconds, I simply looked at the papers. People often assume mechanics solve problems with wrenches. The best ones solve them with records. I thanked Tyler for calling instead of throwing the paperwork away. He looked genuinely confused. "Weren't you angry?" "Not yet." "Why not?" "Because confusion comes before conclusions." Driving home, I kept replaying one question. Who benefits from using an old National Guard maintenance identification instead of creating a fake name? That afternoon, my stepdaughter Melissa stopped by with groceries for my grandson Noah. She listened patiently while I explained what Tyler had found. Then she smiled. "Dad, dealerships mix paperwork all the time. Probably just somebody else's service records." Reasonable. Comforting. Exactly the sort of explanation a tired family member might honestly believe. I nodded. "You're probably right." Relief immediately crossed her face. She hugged Noah before leaving. Standing in the driveway, I watched her truck disappear around the corner. Then I reached into my pocket and unfolded one of the fuel receipts Tyler had quietly slipped into my hand before I left the shop. It wasn't issued by a dealership. It belonged to a commercial fuel supplier serving licensed contractors, and the mileage listed on that receipt suggested someone had driven nearly 40,000 miles under my identity without my ever turning the key. That night, I pulled an old metal toolbox from the shelf above my garage workbench. Most people expected it to hold sockets and wrenches, Instead, it held 30 years of maintenance notebooks. Every vehicle I ever owned, every oil change, every tire replacement, every registration renewal. National Guard motor pool supervisors develop habits that never completely disappear. If a machine mattered, the paperwork mattered just as much. I found the notebook covering the last 5 years. No blue work truck, no commercial fuel account, no unexplained mileage. Only my aging silver pickup, which had spent most of its retirement carrying fishing gear and groceries instead of military equipment. The dealership explanation already looked weaker. The following morning, Tyler called before the shop opened. "I found something else. I'll be there in 20 minutes. When I arrived, he already had several repair invoices spread across his workbench. "I compared your maintenance identification number against older shop backups. And? The number stayed the same. So? But the truck changed. I looked closer. 3 years earlier, the customer identification had belonged to an older white pickup. Then, without explanation, the record switched to the newer blue truck, now sitting in Bay 3. Same customer, different vehicle. No ownership transfer, no registration copy, nothing. Interesting. Not impossible. Just incomplete." Tyler scratched his head. "I've never seen records move like this. Neither have I." He reached beneath the counter and handed me another receipt. Commercial diesel. Purchased every Tuesday morning. Always within 15 minutes of one another. Fleet discounts. Contractor pricing. Regular enough to become routine. Vehicles rarely lie. Habits lie even less. Driving home, I stopped at the county fuel cooperative where local contractors maintained commercial accounts. I wasn't looking for confidential information. Only my own name. The clerk searched politely. "We don't have an active Raymond Price account." "What about older records?" She hesitated. "I do see one account that closed recently." "When?" "About 6 weeks ago." "Interesting. Can I see the paperwork?" "I'm sorry. Not without proper authorization." "Fair enough." Even so, another timeline had quietly appeared. That afternoon, Melissa came by after picking up Noah from physical therapy. She noticed maintenance papers spread across my dining room table. "You've really been looking into this." "I've had time." She smiled gently. "I still think somebody mixed up dealership files." "So do I." The words seemed to relax her immediately. "I knew you'd understand." She packed Noah's medication into the kitchen cabinet, while I quietly folded the repair invoices back into their envelope. As she reached the front door, she turned around. "Oh, I almost forgot." "What?" "The county road project near Mill Creek finally finishes next week." I nodded politely. "That's good news," she smiled. "It'll make traffic easier." "Maybe." But after she left, I unfolded the commercial diesel receipt again. Every Tuesday, fuel purchase had been made less than 3 miles from the Mill Creek construction site. For the first time since Tyler handed me the service card, I stopped wondering whether someone had simply borrowed my identity. I began wondering whether an entire contracting business had quietly built its routine around my name. The easiest thing I could have done was march straight to Melissa's house and demand an explanation. Instead, I thanked her for bringing Noah home safely and told her she was probably right about the dealership making a paperwork mistake. Her shoulders relaxed. I'm glad you aren't worried. There's no reason to be. The words sounded convincing enough that even I almost believed them. Years supervising National Guard motor pools taught me something paperwork rarely reveals on the first day. If people think you've accepted the explanation, they stop protecting the details. That was exactly what I needed. The following morning, I stopped by Tyler's repair shop, carrying coffee instead of questions. I've been thinking. So have I, he admitted. I pulled more shop backups after you left. He reached beneath the service counter and handed me 3 faded repair invoices. Different months, different mechanics, same truck, same customer identification. Then he pointed toward the labor descriptions. Look at the addresses. Every repair authorization listed the truck as working somewhere different. Mill Creek, Pine Ridge, Oak Hollow. 3 construction sites. 1 company. Interesting. Not because of the locations. Because every project belonged to the same county infrastructure program. Driving between those sites required far more fuel than an ordinary pickup owner would ever buy. Suddenly, the commercial diesel receipts made perfect sense. I folded the invoices into my notebook. Thank you. I haven't done anything. You've already done enough. Before leaving, Tyler quietly stopped me. There was one more thing. What? The truck owner always insisted on paying cash. Cash. No company checks, no fleet credit cards. Another small detail, another habit. Driving home, I briefly convinced myself I understood the entire story. Someone had probably borrowed my veteran identification to qualify for discounts offered to retired service members. Wrong. Unethical. But limited. For almost an hour, I believed that explanation. Then my phone rang. Tyler again. I found another invoice. What changed? The customer name. It isn't yours. It is. But the company name finally appears. I grabbed a pen. Read it. Price Infrastructure Services. I stopped writing. I've never owned that company. I know. But somebody wants everyone else believing you do. Late that afternoon, I visited the county clerk's office. I wasn't asking about confidential tax records, only public business registrations. The clerk searched the database. There is a company with that name. When was it registered? About 4 years ago. The date caught my attention immediately. 4 years earlier, just months after my son passed away. The same year, Melissa became Noah's full-time caregiver. Driving away from the courthouse, I realized something painful. This investigation no longer belonged only to paperwork. It belonged to my family. That evening, Melissa stopped by to drop off Noah's backpack after physical therapy. She smiled exactly as she always did. You still aren't worrying about that truck, are you? I smiled back. Not anymore. She hugged me before leaving. As she walked toward her car, I noticed a folded county inspection notice resting on the passenger seat beside her purse. Across the top, I could clearly read 3 words before the door closed. Price Infrastructure Services. For the first time since Tyler found my service card inside a truck I had never owned, I stopped asking who had borrowed my identity. I began asking why my own stepdaughter seemed terrified that I might stop believing the lie. I barely slept that night. Not because I feared someone had stolen my identity, because I was beginning to believe someone I loved had convinced herself it was the only way to keep her family together. The next morning, I drove past the Mill Creek construction project without stopping. National Guard logistics teaches you something about large work sites. The equipment tells the story long before the workers do. Fresh gravel, temporary fencing, county inspection markers. Every delivery had been carefully scheduled. This wasn't a struggling little side business. It was a company racing toward a deadline. I continued another mile before parking beside the County Permitting Office. Public permits aren't private records. Anyone can see who receives permission to work on public infrastructure. I asked only for projects connected to Mill Creek. The clerk handed me the permit summary. Prime contractor. Price Infrastructure Services. Completion deadline. Friday. Mandatory county inspection. 5 days away. Interesting. The business wasn't simply operating under my name. It was approaching the most important inspection in its history. Driving home, I replayed Melissa's expression from the previous afternoon. She hadn't looked frightened when I mentioned the truck. She looked relieved every time I accepted her explanation. Those weren't the same emotion. Late that morning, Tyler called. "You should probably see this." When I reached the shop, the blue truck was still waiting in Bay 3. This time he pointed beneath the hood. I noticed every oil change sticker matches the service invoices. So? The handwriting doesn't. He handed me 3 windshield stickers. Same mileage sequence. Same maintenance schedule. 3 different handwriting styles. 1 company, several mechanics, only 1 customer identification number. Mine. The service card had introduced the mystery. Now the maintenance history revealed the mechanism. My identity wasn't attached to one repair. It had been embedded into the company's entire maintenance system from the beginning. Driving away, I finally made one mistake. I convinced myself Melissa must secretly own the company. The evidence seemed obvious. Inspection notice, company paperwork, constant reassurance. For almost 2 hours, I accepted that conclusion. Then Noah unknowingly proved me wrong. That afternoon, he asked whether I could help him find a photograph for a school project. We searched through Melissa's hallway closet together. While moving an old storage box, a stack of contractor safety manuals slid onto the floor. Across the top of one binder was a familiar company logo, Price Infrastructure Services. Before I could say anything, Noah smiled. "Those belong to Uncle Brian." I looked up. "Your Uncle Brian?" "Mom keeps them here because he works out of his truck." Brian, Melissa's younger brother. Not Melissa herself. The entire investigation quietly shifted direction. She wasn't hiding her own business. She was protecting someone else's. That evening, Melissa stopped by after work. I never mentioned Brian. I never mentioned the permit office. Instead, I thanked her again for everything she did for Noah. She looked exhausted. "You don't know how much that means. I probably know more than you think." For just a second, she searched my face as though trying to decide whether I meant something more. Then she smiled. "I'm glad everything with that truck turned out to be nothing." "So am I." She hugged me before leaving, standing alone in the driveway. I watched her taillights disappear into the darkness. The central question had changed completely. I no longer wondered who built Price Infrastructure Services under my identity. I wanted to know why Brian believed he had only 5 days left before everything came crashing down. For the first time since Tyler handed me that grease-stained service card, I wished the evidence would prove me wrong. I wanted Brian to be innocent. I wanted Melissa's fear to mean nothing more than exhaustion. Most of all, I wanted Noah to grow up believing the adults around him solved problems without hiding from the truth. Instead, every new document pushed me in the opposite direction. The county inspection was only 5 days away. Each passing hour made the consequences heavier. National Guard logistics taught me that deadlines don't create character. They reveal it. The following morning, Tyler met me before opening the repair shop. He looked uneasy. I found another maintenance binder. From the blue truck? He nodded. This one wasn't in the glove compartment. Where was it? Behind the driver's seat. Inside were handwritten service intervals stretching back nearly 4 years. Every oil change, every brake inspection, every tire replacement, every entry listed the same customer account. Mine. But one page immediately caught my attention. A transmission replacement had been approved with a handwritten authorization. Not my signature, not even an imitation. Just the initials B.C. Brian Carter. For the first time, someone connected to the company appeared directly inside the maintenance records. Track A had quietly become something much more useful. Driving home, I stopped at the county permit office one final time. The same clerk recognized me. Back again? I'm trying to understand a contractor's paperwork. She smiled politely. I can't discuss confidential files. I understand. Then she added something unexpected. The Mill Creek inspection isn't only about construction quality. It isn't? No. The contractor's ownership documentation must also match the original application. Interesting. Ownership, not merely workmanship. The inspection suddenly meant far more than concrete and equipment. Late that afternoon, Melissa arrived carrying Noah's physical therapy schedule. She looked more tired than I had ever seen her. I've been picking up extra shifts. You don't have to explain. She sat quietly at my kitchen table. Finally, she whispered, I know you think something's wrong. I waited. I just need a little more time. Those words hurt more than any denial could have, because they contained enough truth to prove she already knew exactly what I was discovering. I reached across the table and gently covered her hand with mine. If someone made a mistake. She closed her eyes. It wasn't supposed to get this big. There it was. Not a confession. Not an explanation. Only the weight of someone who had spent too long trying to hold together something already falling apart. Before I could ask another question, Noah rolled into the kitchen laughing about a school project. Melissa immediately smiled again. The conversation ended. Not because either of us wanted it to, because one little boy deserved one peaceful afternoon untouched by adult failures. After they left, I opened the maintenance binder again. The initials BC, the inspection deadline, the ownership verification. Melissa's plea for more time. Each clue pointed toward the same painful conclusion. Brian hadn't built the company to become wealthy. He built it quickly after Noah's medical expenses overwhelmed the family. Using my veteran identity probably opened doors he believed would otherwise stay closed. That understanding didn't erase the deception. It only made the choice ahead far more difficult. If I stopped the inspection now, innocent workers could lose their jobs overnight. If I stayed silent, taxpayers would certify a public contract built under a false identity. For the first time since this investigation began, clearing my own name no longer felt like the hardest part. Finding a way to protect Noah without protecting the lie had become the real battle. 3 days remained before the county inspection. By then, I understood something Brian almost certainly did not. The greatest danger was no longer the truck. It was the paperwork following it everywhere. Years supervising National Guard vehicle fleets taught me that equipment could be repaired. Records traveled much farther. Once incorrect information entered enough systems, it began creating its own version of the truth. Thursday morning, Tyler arrived at my garage carrying 2 cardboard file boxes. "I think we're ready." Inside were photocopies. Nothing had been taken from anyone. Nothing had disappeared. Only copies of documents already connected to my own identity. Service cards, repair invoices, fuel receipts, maintenance schedules, commercial inspection reminders. Every page contained the same customer identification number. Mine. We spread everything across my workbench. The same bench where my son and I rebuilt his first pickup before he passed away. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, Tyler pointed toward the earliest service card. "This started here." I nodded. Then I pointed toward the county inspection notice. "No, it ends there." Track A had quietly become Track B. The impossible service card no longer existed, only to explain how my identity had been used. It now demonstrated exactly how every later business record depended upon that original false customer file. Remove the foundation. The entire documentation chain collapsed. Late that morning, I quietly visited the county engineering office. I wasn't asking anyone to stop the project, only to explain the inspection process. The coordinator answered politely. The inspection covers 3 areas: construction quality, safety compliance, and contractor eligibility. I looked up. What happens if the ownership documentation changes before inspection? She thought carefully before answering. The work isn't automatically rejected. It simply cannot be certified until ownership records match. Interesting. That changed everything. Justice didn't necessarily require destroying the project. It required correcting the documentation before public approval. Driving home, I realized I had spent days believing only 2 outcomes existed: silence or ruin. There was a third possibility: truth before certification. Late that afternoon, Brian unexpectedly knocked on my front door. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, he said, "I heard you've been asking questions." "I have. I never wanted you involved. I already was." He looked down at the porch. "Noah needed treatment." "I know. The bank rejected my business loan." "I know. They said a veteran-owned company qualified for opportunities I couldn't reach." His voice nearly disappeared. "I thought borrowing your identity would only be temporary." Temporary. The most dangerous word honest people ever tell themselves. I invited him inside. Neither of us raised our voices. Neither of us argued. I simply asked one question. Does Melissa know everything? He closed his eyes. No. She only knows enough to keep believing I can fix it before Friday. There it was. His final opportunity. Without accusation, without pressure, I carefully closed the evidence binder. The inspection happens in 3 days. I know. You can still correct the ownership records before certification. He looked at me for a long time. Then he slowly shook his head. I've gone too far. Not couldn't. Wouldn't. That single decision mattered more than every document Tyler and I had collected. As Brian walked back toward his truck, he believed I had accepted defeat. He thought compassion had finally outweighed accountability. Standing quietly in my garage, I looked once more at the grease-stained service card that had started everything. The trap was finally ready. Brian simply didn't know he had already chosen to step into it. Friday morning began before sunrise. The county inspection team gathered beside the Mill Creek Bridge while contractors checked equipment and workers made final adjustments. Brian stood near the blue truck. Melissa waited several yards away with Noah, who insisted on watching the construction vehicles one last time before the road reopened. Neither of them noticed me arrive with Tyler. Inside my truck rested one ordinary file box. No originals, only copies, only chronology, only records. The county engineering coordinator welcomed everyone. Before we certify the project, we'll complete our documentation review. Exactly as she had described. Construction quality, safety compliance, contractor eligibility. The concrete passed, the drainage system passed, safety equipment passed. Then the coordinator opened the ownership file. Mr. Brian Carter? He stepped forward. I need clarification regarding the registered contractor. Brian forced a smile. We already submitted everything. I believe so. She turned another page. However, additional documentation was voluntarily provided yesterday afternoon. Brian looked around in confusion. That was the first moment he realized something had changed. The coordinator invited me forward. Mr. Price, would you explain these maintenance records? I handed her the same grease-stained service card Tyler had discovered inside the truck. Then the repair invoices. Fuel receipts, maintenance schedules, county permit summaries. Every page carried the same customer identification number. Mine. Next came the company registration timeline, then the commercial fuel purchases. Finally, Tyler explained how the customer identification had remained unchanged while the vehicle history quietly shifted from one truck to another. No speeches, no accusations, just a sequence of documents created years apart by different people for different purposes. Each one confirmed the next. Brian finally spoke. I was going to fix it after this project. The coordinator answered calmly. The question today isn't what you intended. It's whether the ownership documentation supporting this public contract is accurate. Silence settled across the construction site. Melissa lowered her head. Noah looked from one adult to another without understanding why no one was smiling anymore. Then something unexpected happened. Brian reached into the blue truck and removed a folder. He handed it directly to the coordinator. I should have done this months ago. Inside were corrected ownership forms already prepared but never filed. The paperwork had existed. He simply chose not to submit it. The inspection stopped immediately. Not because the bridge had failed, because the contractor's identity required correction before certification could legally continue. The workers kept their jobs. The completed roadway remained protected. Only the certification paused. The coordinator carefully organized every document. "We'll reopen the review after ownership records are lawfully corrected." Brian nodded. "I understand." As county officials finished collecting paperwork, Melissa quietly walked toward me. "I'm sorry. I know. I thought one more project would solve everything." I looked toward Noah, watching construction trucks with complete innocence. One more secret almost became one too many. She began to cry. I gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "This isn't the end. It's the beginning of doing it honestly." As Tyler carried the evidence box back toward my pickup, I looked once more at the grease-stained service card that had started everything. It no longer represented a stolen identity. It had become the first honest page in a documentary trail strong enough to stop a lie without destroying every person caught inside it. 1 year later, the Mill Creek Bridge carried thousands of cars every week. Most drivers never knew the project had once paused only days before certification. That was exactly as it should be. Public confidence should rest on honest work, not dramatic headlines. The county completed a second inspection after Price Infrastructure Services corrected every ownership record, updated its contractor registration, and removed my identity from every maintenance account, service history, permit file, and commercial fuel record. The project ultimately received certification based on accurate documentation rather than borrowed credibility. Justice did not erase the difficult months that followed, but it restored trust. Brian accepted responsibility for using my veteran identification without permission. Instead of trying to defend what he had done, he worked with county officials to correct every record before taking on another public contract. The workers who had honestly built the bridge kept their jobs because the quality of their workmanship had never been questioned. Only the paperwork had. Melissa apologized more times than I could count. Eventually, I asked her to stop. "Tell the truth sooner next time. That will be enough." She nodded. "I promise." Noah continued physical therapy. One afternoon, he proudly rolled into my garage carrying a small metal toolbox Tyler had given him. Inside sat a notebook with blank maintenance pages. He grinned. "Grandpa, I'm keeping records like you." I laughed. "Then write down everything. Even the little things? Especially the little things." He carefully printed the first entry across the top of the page. "Owner verified before service." I smiled. That's the most important maintenance rule you'll ever learn. Today, the old grease-stained service card rests inside a simple picture frame hanging above my workbench. Visitors sometimes ask why I kept it. Because that card reminds me of something every veteran eventually understands. A name is more than identification. It is a responsibility. If this story reminded you that integrity is built one honest record at a time, carry that lesson into your own family. Protect your identity. Review important documents carefully. Ask respectful questions when something feels wrong. And remember that the strongest legacies are preserved not through silence, but through the quiet courage to correct mistakes before they become someone else's burden. God bless every veteran, every honest mechanic, every public servant who protects the trust placed in them, and every family willing to choose truth, accountability, and hope over the comfort of an easy lie.